All right, welcome to yet another episode of Let's Be Mindful. Y'all, I have a very special guest today. I think you're going to love this conversation. So, today I'm going to be interviewing Angela. She is a Christian sexpert. Okay, when I first heard Christian sexpert, I was like, what is that? And so, therefore, I want Angela to introduce herself because I want her to tell us what is a Christian sexpert.
Hi, I'm Angela, the Christian Sexpert. If you don't know me, I talk all about sex and intimacy and Christian marriage. Of course, my followers aren't all evangelical Christians, but for too many years, the evangelical church has actively created harm when it comes to the topic of sex and what sex looks like for Christians. And so I have a good mix of followers who are Christians, who are looking for information for their current marriages, as well as people who aren't Christians or who may call themselves evangelicals because they were harmed by the messaging in the church and they find the information that I am providing extremely healing in part of their journey.
Okay, so I got a bunch of questions for you because I'm very curious about this topic. Okay, so you are a sex and intimacy coach, right?
Great.
Okay, well, let me first ask, do you only work with married couples? I know because you're a Christian sexpert. I mean, do you work with people who are not married?
I have worked with single women. One of my very first coaching sessions was with a woman who was in her 40s and engaged and
Okay.
just needed basic sex education
Mm.
because the church has failed miserably in any sort of basic sex education. So I work with primarily couples and single women are who contact me.
What is intimacy? When we talk about sex and intimacy coach, what is intimacy? How do you define it?
That is such a great question. So, a lot of people, when they hear the word intimacy, their minds immediately go to sex.
Mhm.
But there's actually 12 different types of intimacy that we can experience in marriage or relationships. Sex is only one of those types of intimacy. So, if people think about it, like if they go a little deeper, their next thought is going to be, okay, well, I guess emotional intimacy, like feeling close and connected to my partner is part of intimacy. But if we look at the other types of intimacy, we've got things like aesthetic intimacy, commitment intimacy, conflict intimacy, intellectual intimacy. That's
Mhm.
always a favorite. Are you able to have really deep intellectual conversations with your spouse? Are you on the same page politically or not? And what kind of intimacy does that bring into the marriage, which may bring you around to conflict intimacy? Spiritual intimacy, work intimacy. Those are all various types of intimacy that we can experience. And intimacy is the thing that those are the if you think about the foundation of a house, right? Each
Mhm.
of those types of intimacies are a brick that you are laying into the foundation of the relationship. And that's what your relationship is truly based upon is the different types of intimacies. So when I get a couple that is struggling in their sexual intimacy, that
Mhm.
is when most couples will seek me out is when they are struggling with their sexual intimacy. My typical advice is usually we're going to take sexual intimacy off the table for a period of time. And we're going to spend some time focusing on the other 11 types of intimacy. And I think you'll find that when you spend time investing purposefully and consciously in the other 11 types of intimacy, that the desire for a mutually pleasurable sexual intimate encounter
Mhm.
will rise back up to the top. So, one of my favorite examples is when I'm feeling really disconnected from my husband,
Mhm.
we will engage in our favorite form of recreational intimacy, which is board games. Now, I don't know about in your household, but in my household, board games, so recreational intimacy via board games is also going to bring up issues with communication and conflict intimacy because I'm going to communicate, you're going down, I'm going to beat you, and then we're going to have to resolve that conflict.
Mhm.
Um, and those are all and then at the end of the evening, engaging in this recreational intimacy, the conflict intimacy, we get to a point where I'm feeling more inclined to want to hop into bed with him
Mm.
because we have built a foundation of other types of intimacies.
Okay, so when a couple comes to you and say that they're struggling with their sexual intimacy, is does that mean they're just not having sex, or is it they're one person's not getting pleasure out of it? I guess it's a combination of things, right? But is it mostly they're just not connecting sexually?
Usually what's happened is I see a what I would call like a drive disparity, where one partner says, I'm just not interested in sex as
Mhm,
often as they are, and they're getting frustrated with me because I don't want sex as often as they want it. And I feel broken. I feel like there's something wrong with my libido. Maybe my body's broken.
mhm,
Um, and I have a laundry list of questions that I go through in my pre screening process because there could be a lot of reasons why one partner
mhm,
wouldn't be interested in sexual intimacy. And sometimes it's a simple fix where it's, really focusing on the other 11 types of intimacy because you've just become disconnected as a couple and you've entered kind of like the roommate phase of the relationship, right?
mhm,
Or it could be something like she's postpartum and breastfeeding,
mhm,
and there isn't enough information out there that tells couples who have newborns that her hormones are not going to regulate until 2 years post cessation of the breastfeeding relationship. So
mm,
it's not even 2 years postpartum, it's
mhm,
2 years after she stops nursing do her hormones resume a baseline from what they were pre-baby. And where is that education when couples are getting ready to have a baby? It's just not there. Sometimes it's issues of marital coercion where one person feels entitled to use their spouse's body for their own personal satisfaction
mhm,
and will put pressure on their spouse to make that happen. And we know that obligation kills desire. So if someone feels obligated to have sex, they
mhm,
don't going to want sex. So
mhm.
there's so many reasons that couples will seek me out for coaching.
Okay, wait. So the obligation piece.
Yes,
Now, let's say they don't have necessarily sexual intimacy issues, right?
right.
But we know that I don't know if there's couples that their sex drive always matches. Like I want it just as much as he wants it. He wants it just as much as I want it. Like I think there might be always some type of mix match. What would you say? Let's say they may not. Well, they may come to you, but there's a mix match in the sexual desires.
Mhm.
But women, typically the men might have more of a sex drive. Typically, unless they get to the age where things start to go south, right? But let's
Right.
say that their thing works just fine, and her body just works, but he wants it more than she does. Not like I want my man to walk around here unhappy. Like there's no issues in the relationship. It's just we have different sex drives. Like, how does she get over that feeling to where it's borderline obligation, but it's also maybe I need to make sure that I please my man? Like, do you find that people deal with that, like toggle that line? And if so, like, how do you deal with that?
So even in the language that you use to phrase the question, I hear a lot of issues with just the language, which
Okay.
is the language that we have been using for years to talk about
Mm-hmm.
these issues. And they aren't recognizing some fundamental truths about what sex is supposed to be in a mutually pleasurable situation. So it's looking at, well, I don't want my man to be unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Why is his happiness the gold standard for the relationship, first of all?
Mm, okay. Okay. I'll need you to preach on this, girl. Break it down. Break it down for us. I want to know.
Second of all, why is his happiness predicated on how much sex he's having? Why is his happiness tied to the number of orgasms he has in a month or a week?
Mhm.
Typically, the next thing that a woman is going to get told is if you don't keep him satisfied, he's going to find it somewhere else, right?
Yeah, yes, how many times, girl? I know you've heard that, but yes, we hear that. And for the record, let me just say for the record, my For me personally, if look, I be grinding and I know you be grinding too. Like when you own a business, you're grinding. And then I'm still in corporate America, I'm grinding. Now, if I, feel like if I get to a place where I feel like I'm obligated, yes, to your point, I'm mentally going to start checking out because I don't want to feel like I'm obligated to perform a task. But we have been told as women that yeah, you got to please your man. We got to take care of our man. And my mindset is a little differently. Like I have to take care of myself first and foremost so that I can feel like giving to somebody else. That's me personally. But I do know there are women out here who feel like they have to perform. Girl, they be tired. They be dealing with the kids. They're grinding. They're taking care of everything. They're taking care of their man, their own lives, and then they still have to perform. But yes, that mindset is there that the happiness of your man is tied to you giving up the booty. So yes, where is that thinking even coming from? And if we think like that, how can we address it?
So it's kind of a cultural thing, right? For
Mhm,
years, women have been told men just want sex more than women do.
mhm,
Is it like, is that true though? Or is it just men are more culturally encouraged to express their sexuality than women are? Women are not allowed to express interest in sexual activity, or
mhm.
they get told that they're fast or they're loose or they're,
A hoe.
a hoe, all the
Mhm,
other, or they're a slut, all the
mhm,
other where are all those words that describe men? Why are all those words that describe women? So
mhm,
is it that men desire more sex, or
mhm.
is it that women are shamed for their sexual desire and also expected to perform on command?
Mm, You said a word there. For I never thought about that. I know because I mean, I'm thinking like double standard, right? I don't know if okay, this is something I saw online, and I don't do like reality. I barely watch TV, but I saw something online with the young lady, and I can't remember her name, but they have classified her, ridiculed her as being too loose in the booty and the cootie. Okay, and her name is Brittany. Her first name is Brittany. I can't, is her last name Rayner or something like that? And Shannon Sharp had just interviewed her and she had revealed that she's only had 35 and I say only because 35 partners in your lifetime. I'm sorry y'all, it is not a high number when when we see men, because when you compare it to men, we're looking well beyond 35, but they try to ridicule her for having 35. But on the flip side, if a man has 35, I mean, that's probably a low number. We're talking that Shannon Sharp is 55, and that girl, darn well he done, and he was a big time football player, and he's got money. Darn well he had more than 35 little coochies. Like, come on now. But the way he reacted to her, he really put her down. But I've heard it explained this way, and I don't know, Angela, if you would agree, because and this a man made up this explanation. Let me just say that ain't no woman make up this daggone explanation I'm about to give. A man made this up. That a woman, because of our anatomy, we receive, right? And so we're I see your face. We receive the penis, right? Whereas they go around poking it. And so it's different because we're receiving the energies, right? And so therefore, that's why it's more shameful for women. You ever heard that before?
Is she receiving any pleasure from all this poking that he's doing? That's what I wanna know. All this receiving that I'm supposed to be doing, what exactly am I receiving? Am I receiving any pleasure, or is all the pleasure for him? That's my when I have couples that come into coaching with me, that's one of my first questions is, "Do you orgasm as much as your husband does?" Because
Mm,
particularly in evangelical culture, there's something like 42 point gap in orgasm rates. So less
wow.
than and we don't have concrete numbers on evangelical women versus, non-evangelical women.
Mhm,
So the statistics I am referencing are just coming from my knowledge of the evangelical population. But less than 50% of evangelical women orgasm every single time that they have sex with their husbands, versus over 95% of
Hmm.
evangelical men are orgasming every time that they're having sex with their wife. So there's over a 40-point gap in those statistics. Why? Why women are the ones that can have multiple orgasms? Men can only have one orgasm before they need time to recover. So why are women having less orgasms?
Okay,
And
why? Wait. Now, why? Please tell us why.
there's this is such a multifaceted, complex thing. Part of it is because we're told women just don't enjoy sex as much as men.
Mm.
Part of it is because men on average only need 5.4 minutes in order to orgasm, whereas women need 16 to 20 minutes of direct clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. Traditional
Mm.
intercourse, when people think of sex, they think of penis in vagina intercourse, right? They don't think about the literal thousands of other activities that they could be doing as part of a sexual encounter. Sex is the main event, right? What do you think of the main event? P and V. And the majority, over 80% of women cannot orgasm from penis and vagina intercourse because it's not providing that 14 to 20-minute clitoral stimulation.
Mm.
And so he pops off in 5.4 minutes and he's done. He has not prioritized making sure that there's a literal book called She Comes First, because
Let me just say 5 minutes. You said 5.4 minutes.
5.4 minutes. The average man
Mm.
needs about 5.4 minutes.
Girl, that'd have been like a marathon for my ex-husband. Now that he wouldn't have been able to make that 5.4. So you can you can only imagine how unhappy I was walking around here. Wow.
Right?
Okay. Well,
And if you're not even if you are not even able to orgasm from that 5.4 minutes, is it really that good for you? And people
mhm,
make that specific part of sex the gold standard for sex. I have had people tell me, "Well, my husband doesn't feel like we've had sex unless he gets to penetrate me." Why?
mm,
Why is mutual pleasure, mutually creating
mm,
an experience not
mm,
e not enough? Why does it have to be a specific thing that's
mhm.
the main event?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, all of the 3 times I've had sex because I have 3 kids. And I'm thinking, the 3 times that I've done it to produce a child each time. Um at the like my kids listen to this.
Maybe not this episode.
And my daddy, I'm a grandmother to 2, and I'm still daddy's little girl. My daddy gonna listen to this. But
Daddy.
I'm thinking like what you're saying. Yeah, like why do we, because I started with that segment and then yeah, why do we put so much onus on the man having pleasure? Like, do you think culturally, like, okay, not even culturally, because I think changing something culturally is a big, big shift. But how do you get a couple to see the other side? Like, what about her pleasure? Is that when I guess you focus on the other 11 intimacy levels? Like, how do you get someone to shift that thinking and think about her pleasure?
So, I'm not known for my subtlety. Um, I am about as subtle as a 2 by 4 to the head, and I will just straight up ask him, "Why does her orgasm matter less than your orgasm does? Why
Hmm.
should she have sex with you if there is literally nothing enjoyable for it?" And there's usually not a lot that can be said in response to that,
Hmm.
especially particularly men are culturally conditioned and women are culturally conditioned to think these things.
Hmm.
And when I point out the disparity is when I see the light bulb happen. Oh, yeah. I guess her orgasm is just as important as mine.
Don't men, I mean, there are some men out here that really believe in pleasing their woman
Oh, yeah.
first, right? And they exist. And hallelujah to the women who have those men, right?
Yes.
And I will say, I'm gonna raise my hand. the men who are thinking that, okay, maybe I'm getting my pleasure and I'm not really thinking about her, is that a lot of times it's just not them being selfish. It's just a lack of awareness because no one has ever taught them that, okay, it takes longer for her to actually have an orgasm. You're coming like this, right? And then you take 20, 30, 3, 4 hours, to recover from that one explosion. I mean, is it because of a lack of information that they have, or do you find it, no, they're just selfish?
It's a mix between both.
Mm,
And then you have, particularly in the space I work with evangelicals, you have spiritual trauma thrown in with things like Bible verses that get
mm,
weaponized against women. Because there have been teachings in the church that, men need sex. God designed men to need sex more than women. There's really pastors out here saying things like God designed men to need sex every 3 days. There is, side note, no biblical or scientific backing for that teaching. And
mm.
there's no talk about, well, women want it just as much. Women enjoy it just as much. And so there's a sort of cultural idea that women just don't care as much. So if I've got mine, do I really need to worry about hers because she doesn't need it like I need it? She doesn't enjoy it the same way I do. Um, and so it's sort of this like for some men, it just hasn't occurred to them. And then there really are men that are just that selfish.
What do you do when you coach? Okay, I'm a middle-aged woman. Okay, I'm knocking at 50. I can't fight biology. I can't fight the clock, right? As much as I try to, girl, I try. Okay, I be trying to fight the age. But reality is, menopause comes in just like men, they get the noodle thing. Menopause is taking over. It is changing our bodies, right?
Right.
Would you send someone like it's not that she doesn't want to perform, but maybe her body is just giving out because sex as we get older can be more painful because we're hitting menopause. We don't have as much estrogen. It's giving us that, that the wet cooter coo, right? And so things can get a little bit more painful. And it's not that she doesn't want to have sex, maybe she can't. How do you get around that where, okay, this could be a barrier and it's a health thing. It has nothing to do with her desire. How do you coach that couple?
So I am also in my mid 40s. And I am also experiencing some of those early perimenopause symptoms. So
Mhm.
like that is not I am not unsympathetic to what is happening. And so we do experience more vaginal dryness.
Mhm.
We do experience a loss of lubrication. A lot of women experience thinning of the tissues in
Mhm.
that area. Is sex really
Mhm.
just penis and vagina, or is sex the
Mhm.
playground of your marriage and relationship?
Mm.
When we think about sex as a specific act, it becomes very transactional and performative.
Mhm.
When we frame sex as the playground of marriage, sounds so much richer, so much fuller, so many more activities that can happen with that situation, right? So now there's so many ways that we can play in the bedroom with our spouse. There are many couples who sex is no longer a part of
Mhm.
their marriage because of disability or age
Mm.
or things like that, right? And now that doesn't make their marriage any less fulfilling for them. There
Mhm.
are so many marriages where sex has been taken out of the equation for one reason or another, but they are
Mhm.
still as committed to each other as any other couple that is having sex on a regular basis. So obviously, my entire platform is based on go have good sex. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think that sex is an extremely important part of a marriage and relationship, but I don't think it is a requirement
Okay.
for healthy, happy marriages.
Okay. So let's say a couple meets. They're not married yet. They have not married yet. Would you I know you're a Christian sexpert, but I gotta ask. Would you recommend couples to try it before they buy it, or would you rather they wait until it's bought and then try it? And if it's the latter, how do they hate? What happens if it's terrible and if or if it's they just don't mesh?
So we know statistically that couples who engage in premarital sex are statistically more likely to divorce than couples
Mm,
who wait for after marriage. Um, so my response is, look, I'm not your Holy Spirit. We know that because I am coming from a place of a Christian worldview. And so I know that the Bible says that God's best plan for our lives is to wait until we are married. But I also
mhm,
know that God is bigger than any mistakes that we make. God is, like
mhm,
I did not get saved until I was 19, and so I was
mhm,
not did not wait. There was lots of mistakes. God is God is bigger than the choices that we make. And so
mhm.
statistically and biblically, I suggest waiting, but I also think that no matter what has happened, it can be redeemed. Now, as far as you wait and then it turns out to be terrible, hi, come hire me. I'll help you. Like we can fix it. It doesn't matter how we can fix it. As long as you are both invested in making your spouse happy and creating a beautiful sex life together, technique can be taught. Adaptations can be made for physical issues. There's so many solutions. I have written what is called the marriage play date. It's a date night experience designed to help couples go deeper in their sexual intimacy. It's a
Mhm.
list of over 500 sexual activities. And so if you go through this list together, you're going to find something where you're compatible. There will be activities on this list that you are both interested in. And that's a place to build from. So just because, the first few months are bad and you're still learning to please each other, there are so many options for building a better sex life if it's not the one that you want.
I've heard many girlfriends who are not married, and so we have experience life outside of marriage as well. And then I hear like the feedback, or even from people, period, when they first are intimate with somebody and it's terrible. But I'm glad to know that it can be learned. So two people can, as long as they're invested into or being with each other. And I'm assuming that's got to be the key, right? If it's because intimacy isn't just the penis and the vagina. Intimacy, as you pointed out, it includes a lot of things, but if you become intimate with your partner and you really start to grow and learn and want to be and invest into each other, then you're going to want to please them. And I know you were going over now. I want to talk about the conflict intimacy because I do believe, um, now with my current relationship, I will say that he and I, and it's taken a little bit, but I do focus on communication because I think communicating with your partner is very, very important. I don't argue, but we do have disagreements, right? And I do feel that because we talk them out, I want to hear his perspective. We don't talk over each other, but these are the ground rules that we have laid for each other in this relationship. Every disagreement that we have, I do feel like afterwards it brings us closer because I was able to hear you out. So, is that what conflict intimacy is, or if you could tell me what how you define it?
No, that's exactly what conflict intimacy is. So when you are engaging in a conflict, right?
Mhm,
Are you fighting to be right or are you fighting for the relationship?
mhm,
That's kind of like the definition of conflict intimacy. Um, and when I talk to couples about conflict intimacy, I tell them you can't discuss the state of your conflict intimacy when you're in the middle of a conflict
mhm, mhm,
because everybody's so when we know when we look at the way the brain functions,
mhm,
um, we know that when our brain is in a heightened state of arousal, and by arousal, I don't mean sexual arousal, I mean a heightened state of anger or strong emotion, a heightened state of offense, of hurt, our brains cannot learn when we are in that state.
Mm,
Our brains can only learn when we are at a baseline regulated state.
mhm,
Um, and that's something that when we look at like how children learn, we know that children who are having a meltdown cannot learn when they're in the middle of a meltdown. And so that's why you
mhm,
teach them when they come out of it. And the same principle applies to adults. When you are fighting with your spouse, and you are both in a heightened emotional state, you
yep,
can't hear each other. You cannot set guardrails up
mhm,
for the relationship when you are both in that heightened state of arousal. You have to wait until later when you have both
mhm.
regulated yourselves down to baseline to discuss, I didn't like how we handled that conflict. What are some rules that we can set in place for the next time that we have a conflict?
Mhm.
And that's where the real intimacy of conflict comes in, is when you're both in the regulated state and you are having discussions about how you fight.
I love that because I couldn't agree with you more. We talking about, I might as well talk about it. The guy, the person I'm with, and he's a little older than me. I'm upper 40s. He's 51, and sometimes I'd be like, "Has anybody? Have you ever had a healthy relationship where you didn't yell and argue? And, because I find that if you're yelling, you're arguing, you're upset, your tempers are up here, you're not listening. You're not hearing the other person. So when you get up here, like I tell people, like one of you have to, and it's not throwing in the towel, but somebody has to wave the white flag and step out of the argument to get both of you to, okay, let's level set. Either you walk over here, you walk over here, because to keep arguing is going to make it so much worse. So with him, I have had to just say, you know what? I have been the one to always wave the white flag because I know and I have trained myself and trained other people in how to have a productive argument, a disagreement. No relationship is going to be without a disagreement. We're not going to resolve anything if we're both yelling and we're getting upset. Nothing's going to be nothing. So I love how you say that. And so you work with couples through that, out of the, let's say, out of all the 12 levels of intimacy, what's the most popular ones that people need to work on?
But I would say that work intimacy is another big one. So
Okay.
work intimacy is not like going to work with your spouse, because like let's not make things weird.
I was like, what the heck is that? I was like, "Dude, we go to work together, but go ahead. What is work intimacy?"
Let's not make things weird. Um your poor husband's boss. What why is this is not bring your wife to work day. What is happening? No, work intimacy is working together towards common goals, working together to build a life together. And so this harkens back to the ever popular terms domestic labor, mental load, things like that. So are you carrying an equitable mental load, or are you just expecting your wife to be house manager and
Mhm,
manage all the details of building a life together? And a lot of times I find that wives have lost their interest in sexual activity because they feel like it's one more thing on the to do list that never ends,
mhm,
because she is carrying the bulk of the mental load in the household. And
mhm,
so when the and it isn't so much where he comes in to be the hero and rescuer and say, okay, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Or, okay, I'll carry more of the mental load so that she has more space in her brain for sex. No, that's not, still doesn't work.
mhm,
She wants a partner who is
mhm,
invested in building a life with her, not
mhm.
somebody to come save her from her life. It's a full partner building a life together.
But do people's love language have any bearing into how their sex lives, right? And in which you, because okay, the example that you just gave, girl, let me tell you, my
She's
love
just
language, girl, my love language is acts of service. You help me around this house, girl, I'll get naked. Like, because you're helping me. So can you tell me, girl, tell me, please, the love language piece.
Is your love language really acts of service, Or are you just exhausted by carrying the responsibility of all the day-to-day activities
It's probably
and
that.
you need propped up? Was there any actual research that went into the writing of the love languages, or was it written on a single man's opinion and the church propped it up as the next best gospel?
Okay, I can see you ain't a fan of the girl. Let's break it down then because
Mhm.
you ain't a fan of the love language.
Why is it that every man's love language is physical touch and the way he feels the most love is through sex, and every single woman's primary love language is acts of service because she's carrying the bulk of the domestic labor in the house?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I ain't, you know what? I never even thought of that. I never thought of that. I can definitely tell you because I see my parents grind. My mom and dad are still married. They've been married almost 51 years.
Well,
I see how they work together. My mom culturally is from another country. My dad is from the US. And I, even through cultural differences, I see how my parents pull together. I see my parents' love language, like I see it. It's they are a good couple, right? And I'm very blessed to have had them as my mom and dad. Now, my mother will take on a lot of work, girl, and then she gets mad and tell me to sit down, don't do so much, take your time. But yet my mother does a million things. So if you help my mother out, or if not only that, if you just it's a slap in her face and she gets really upset if you don't help her out. Like you don't wash the dishes. Like you left the dishes for me. You don't love me because you left this work for me. And then I see that in me. But now I'm thinking, is it because I got too much sugar, honey, iced tea on my plate and I add so much and therefore my life is too busy and therefore that's my love language?
mm, I do think that the love languages are trash
Oh.
because of the way the church and society has just made them into like the second gospel. Do I think that there's something that could be learned from the love languages? Yes. So let me give you an example. We had been married for a long time before we had our son. Um when when my son was 3, my husband left to become an over the road truck driver with the ultimate goal of me quitting my job to be the at home parent.
Mhm,
Um, and so he would be gone. He initially was gone for 4 months and we didn't see him. But
mhm.
he was initially gone. He would be gone for 3 weeks. He'd be home for 2 days and he'd be gone again
Wow.
for another 3 weeks. Um, in that season, what love language would I have needed the most? Right? I would have needed acts of service because I did not have a partner in the home to help me.
Mm,
Now, we're in a season where my husband is home every night and can be fully participating member of our household. Now, what
mhm,
sort of love language is going to be my primary? And is that going to fluctuate with what is happening in our lives? What if my son gets sick and he has spent the entire day snuggling with me because he's sick? Am I going to get to the end of the day and be completely touched out and not want to be touched at all? Does that mean that my love language is not physical touch?
mhm,
Or does my husband wind up taking a trip for a few days and my son goes to grandma for 2 of those days and I've been alone in a house for 5 days with nobody touching me?
mhm,
Am I going to need physical touch more when he comes home then? Are
mm,
our needs are let I don't have better language for this. Our love language needs
mhm,
change in seasons of life, in the day to day, how our other needs are being met. What the book did was say that there's one way that
mhm,
you give and receive love, and
mhm,
that's not true. We
mhm,
should
mhm,
be seeking to communicate all of those things to our spouse all the time. And
mhm.
we need to stop weaponizing, well, you're not speaking my love language because you're not having sex with me. You're not speaking my love language because you left dishes in the sink.
Mm,
So when we're weaponizing them, that's a problem. When we think that our partner only needs one kind of love, that's
mhm.
I don't need just I need all kinds of love.
Yep.
I am a needy person. I'm sorry. I
Mhm,
need to be loved in more than one dimension. I'm not I'm not something on your to-do list that you can
mhm.
insert one type of love and get something out of me.
Like, if you see me doing a million things because that's just me. I'm gonna do a million things, and you add to it, that doesn't make me feel appreciated at all. That makes me feel like you're not considerate. You're not even thinking of me as let me take something off her
Is
plate. Let me help her.
is that appreciation or is that basic respect? Is
I
that
think I
the
think it's I
basic
think it's definitely basic respect.
the basics of being in relationship with another human being is observing what they're going through and figuring out how you
Mhm.
can support them?
Now, are there cases that you've seen? Like, because I'm gonna say I think it might be, and now I'm not trying to be a sexist, but I think it might be more men who who might not be great in that aspect, recognizing that, you know what, I'm gonna help my partner out. Whatever, the basic, like you say, the basic respect. Because I do see that often. Like, I don't is it men not reading minds? Like, how can we help them understand it without saying, I don't want to accuse a man and I don't want to make it seem like you're not. I want to honor the things that you're doing well, but I also want to talk about the things you're not doing well. Right. So, how can we bring that up to our partners to see I'm not feeling loved right now? How can we communicate it to our partners?
We could talk another hour about that one. We have been socialized to tiptoe around men's feelings and relationship issues when we have them. So, right, typical advice would be, well, you have to speak in a way that a man would understand and
Mhm,
you have to make it really clear for him and you don't want to upset him and make him think that it's his idea and all
mhm,
these things. Why can I not just go to my adult spouse and say, "You know what? I'm feeling very overwhelmed, and I don't feel like we have an equitable distribution of the mental load in the household. I'd like to start a conversation about how we can structure our lives better so I feel that there's a more equitable distribution. Can we
mhm.
start having that conversation? It's not all going to be solved in one night, and I acknowledge that. But what are your thoughts?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking these questions for y'all. Okay, let me just say I know how to communicate. Let me be very clear. If nothing else, I know how to communicate my needs, and I know how to bring it up in such a way where I'm not attacking somebody. Because it's a fine line, right? Because somebody
Agreed.
could take it as you are attacking me, but no, babe, I'm giving feedback because I want you to love me. So I feel like I'm being loved, right? And I want to do the same. Where can I do better? Right? What can I do better? Okay, so just to piggyback off of that, do you suggest like weekly to keep the intimacy going, right? Do you believe in having check-ins with your partner to see where we stand?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So in my product, the 31 Days of Intimacy, it's a guide where I take couples through each of the 12 different types of intimacy over the course of a month. And one of the things that I suggest is sitting down, carving out 10 to 15 minutes,
Mhm,
at least a couple of times a week, sitting down without distractions, no phones, no TV, 10 to 15 minutes to just sit and stare at each other's faces and talk to each other. Um, and it's for some couples that's really intimidating. I don't remember the last time I had an uninterrupted conversation with my husband for 15 whole minutes. What am I going to talk to him
mhm,
about?
mhm,
And so maybe you start by going on Amazon and you buy conversation starter cards, right?
mhm,
And you start by using prompts to have conversations. If you guys are out of practice in, having conversations with each other. Because some people do get really intimidated by that level of emotional or communication intimacy. And so there are places that you can start. But I absolutely think that having frequent check-ins about,
Mhm.
like the state of the family, the state of the marriage, the state of your sex lives are imperative to a
Mhm.
healthy sex life, um, and overall relationship.
Okay, so let's say a couple is long distance because you spoke about being, having a distance
Oh, yeah.
between you two for a little bit. And I'm in that situation where we have a little bit we're in a whole continent away from each other right now for a month. How do couples keep the intimacy alive when you are so far apart? You may not spend so much time together. That long distance connection when there's no obviously I'm not getting my sexual needs met. But either way, like what are some suggestions that people can do to keep the intimacy going when you aren't anywhere near each other?
Okay, well, first of all, why aren't you getting your sexual needs met, girl? There are Bluetooth vibrators where he can control what the vibrator is doing. You guys can be on FaceTime together. So first of all, we live in a beautiful age of technology.
True, true.
So, um, there's so many ways that you
Mhm,
can stay connected when you are long distance. We lived that for a year and it was brutal. And if you are in that situation, I am sorry. It was the hardest year of my life. Um,
mm,
so some things that I typically recommend, get an app. My husband and I for a season used an app called Twig where you can upload pictures and journal entries and you just my husband and I use that as a sex journal, but it can be used for any sort of just writing back and forth and ways to stay connected. Um, I have had military couples where he would be deployed, she would be at home.
mhm,
Um, my favorite couple for this, he would send her a new sex toy every month,
mm,
and they would, use the Marco Polo app, which is a
mhm,
video app where she would record a video of her getting spicy on
mm,
Marco Polo, send it to him. When he had a moment to watch, he would be able to watch it and respond with his own spicy video, and when she had time to watch and she would watch and respond, so they communicated their spite. They kept their sexual intimacy alive using Marco Polo.
mm,
Um, Something else I recommend is the conversation cards that I referenced earlier. Get a box
mhm,
of conversation cards and
mhm,
use it to either text questions back and forth or hop on phone calls and use conversation. Create create at least one point in your day where you can talk to each other for at least 15, 10 to 15 minutes. And if all you're doing is like a single conversation card before one of you passes out, at least you've had a single moment of connection. When my
mhm,
husband was over the road, I had Bluetooth headphones and I was wear them from the moment I got up in the morning to the moment I went to bed at night. And no matter what I was doing, if I had a moment where my son was eating a snack and I was doing dishes, I would call him when I was doing the dishes and we would just talk for 15 minutes. And then, I would go and do something with my son, and then I would be doing laundry, and I'd call him again for another 10 minutes. It was just kind of like we wouldn't even have to talk about anything. It was just that being in connection. There are games that you can play um, over distances. For instance, my husband had to go out of state for training for a new job, and we planned an actual board game that can be
mhm,
played over FaceTime. He took certain components with him, and I kept certain components here at the house, and we were able to play a board game over FaceTime together.
mm.
Um, so there's so many options for long distance connection and intimacy. It's just a matter of getting really creative about how you're going to do it.
Okay. Now I don't know if you saw an article about like men are this came out, I want to say early this year. Men are experiencing like loneliness at a higher rate than women. The intimate connections. I think, and I don't know. I have my thinkings, right? I think a lot of women are really working on themselves. Like the days of us needing a man, for survival, to get a house and we couldn't get a job and all this other thing, all the other stuff. we needed men a lot more than maybe 50, 60 years ago than we need them now, or maybe more than that, more than that. I keep forget, girl, in my mind, I'm still 20. I ain't 20.
Same.
In my mind, I'm still young. Girl, I ain't young. But anyway, we needed men like my grandparents' age. We needed men a
Right.
lot more. And so men, probably didn't have to invest into themselves to really attract a actual woman, right? It was like, look, you're going to be my woman. You're going to cook, clean, and I'm going to give you shelter. And I'm going to buy these groceries and you're going to come home and cook it, right? The dynamics of relationships have changed a little bit to where they are now. And so I think women have leveled up. Girl, we have been working on ourselves. And so some of the things that we may have would have accepted 60, 70 years ago, we're not accepting right now. We're like, I don't need you to have a house. I got my own house. I got my own mortgage. I don't need a man to survive anymore. So a lot of women are now choosing to stay more single. Whereas I feel like married men, and I didn't make the statistic up, but married men live longer than single men. I didn't make it up. It's a true statistic, right?
It
And
is
so men are trying, they as they get older, they want a marriage. Because it's like they need a woman to take care of them. We're making sure they go to the doctors. We're cooking. We're making sure they're okay. But we now have an epidemic where men are now more lonely than women. So how can people create intimacy in their lives when they don't have a partner? Is that even possible? Like, that loneliness epidemic, what can we do about that?
absolutely. I experience so many of these 12 types of intimacy with my friends. Um, I'm
Mm,
currently in the middle of planning a trip to visit my best friend who lives in another state. And we had an entire planning session about what board games we're going to play because
mm,
we're board game nerds. I attract other board game nerds. I'm sorry.
mhm,
But like we're planning that recreational intimacy together
mm,
and things like spiritual intimacy. Attending church
mhm,
creates spiritual intimacy with the other members in the church.
mhm,
Um things like creative intimacy.
mhm,
You can in the early years of our marriage, my husband and I were members of the local community theater. And so the, anybody who's done theater knows that a theater production is a very intimate experience. And you create lifelong
mhm,
relationships with people
mhm.
that you do theater with. And so absolutely, there are ways to create these moments of intimacy with people that you are not married to.
Mm. Okay, so then I believe okay, I don't know. There's this thing on Netflix. We started watching it, but we fell asleep on it. But I do want to go back and watch it. But I watched this thing on Netflix about places in the world where people are living up to 100 years old or more than 100 years old. And of course, the number one place was Okinawa, Japan, right? And so they went there to see what are they doing to live more than 100 years old, right? And then the next place was somewhere in Italy. But one thing that I noticed, besides the healthy eating and they're staying active, but one thing I noticed that both of these countries are doing is they have like a social circle. And it's not necessary to your point. It wasn't a man. It wasn't because women typically live longer than men, right? And so these women have outlived their husbands. What they have created, and these older men, they created a social network so people don't feel alone. So I love that you said that because I know my girlfriend and I, she's one of my best friends. I have two best friends, and she and I talk about this. And I think it's important because I know people out here are lonely and they're lonely. We had COVID, and I think people are lonelier than ever these days, because you got to get that intimacy somewhere or the loneliness will creep in. And we know loneliness kills.
One of the things that I talk about is even if you are in a marriage or in a relationship, you need time away from your spouse to create intimacy with people outside of your marriage, right?
Mhm,
You need to have intimate relationships with somebody more than just your spouse, right?
mhm,
You need time away so that when your spouse and the two of you come back together, you're an interesting person. If
Mm,
you
mhm.
only ever invest in the relationship with your significant other, you're gonna get really bored really fast.
Especially because I deal with people who are trying to find love again. And we see this more with women, where women will give up their hobbies, their girlfriends, all I'm gonna be with my man. Girl, please keep your life. Do not give up your life because he fell in love with you or he finds you interesting because you have a life. And then you give up your life to be with him. And then now you're no longer interesting. And it's like, well, what do you expect? He might not be interested in you anymore because you're no longer interesting because you have changed the depth of who you are to be with somebody else. And it's like, no, no, no. Keep your hobbies and your interests. And I don't know if you've read this book, but it was a real, I read this book like this because I resonate with whoever, I can't remember her name who wrote it, but I resonated with everything she said in this book. And why do men love bitches? And I didn't make up the title. That's the name of the title of the book. Okay. But I was like, yes, yes, girl. I read that book probably in a day and a half at the most, probably in about 3, 4 hours. I was done with the book. But one thing she talks about in the book is women, keep your identity. Do not give up yourself to be with a man. Please don't. Like,
I'm launching by the time that this airs, I will have launched a new course.
oh,
So,
yeah. Come on, talk about your course. I want to know.
okay, a lot of the things that we talked about today, the different types of intimacy and how, we have a disparity in sex drives and things like that. One of the things that I see a lot with couples in my coaching sessions is we've reached the roommate stage where we're in a season of young kids and we're just roommates. We don't talk to each other. I don't you know We don't hardly see each other anymore, and I'm not ready to hop into bed, or
Mhm,
our sex life is just it's just not great. Like it's okay. Nobody's bad.
mhm,
I don't hate him. It's not good. Or maybe there's been some lower level traumas in the marriage, like a not, big things like cheating or anything like that,
mhm,
but just, like, I don't trust you the way that I used to trust you. And
mhm,
how do we get that back? And so I'm launching a course, Find Your Fire, and it's going to
mhm,
take you through looking at the cracks in your foundation, where the foundation of your sex life has broken and needs repaired, and rebuilding it from the ground up. And it's a 4-week self-paced course designed to help couples reignite that sexual spark in their bedroom again.
I love that. Now, can I ask, did you record it on like Kajabi or what platform did you use to record your course?
It will be launching on my website, thechristiansexpert.com.
Okay, awesome. And it's self-paced in 4 weeks.
Yes.
In 4 weeks, is that like an hour a day? How does the 4 weeks spread out?
So it's all the videos themselves, I would say, are 30 minutes or less. Now, there are assignments that go along with each week that will require a time investment. And the way that it's designed
Mhm,
is you just because, like the week 2 video is available, you don't have to run right out and move on to the next step in the course
mhm.
until you have really built on the materials that are covered in that first week, right?
Okay.
And so looking at um and I give guidelines, like this week I want you to focus on creating a sex journal, or this week I want you to focus
Mhm,
on, you know, talking about this particular topic with your spouse. And so it's really acknowledging that a lot of couples are in the season because they are in a season of small children. And so maybe you only have 2 days this week to devote to the course
mhm.
and rebuilding things, and that's okay. And we can still rebuild and we can still build up even when you are in the middle of this particular season. And so
Okay.
really that's why I wanted it to be self-paced so that couples didn't have to move on until they felt confident in the skills that they learned
Mm.
from the start.
Well, thank you for talking about your course is coming out in a couple of weeks. So, Angela, do you want to share your contact information, how people can get in contact with you if they need that sexpert information.
Sure. All they have to do is hit up my website, thechristiansexpert.com. I'm on most of the socials as the Christian Sexpert. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Message me on any of the places.
All right. I'm gonna tell you, I loved this conversation. I really, and I know girl, I got a million more questions. I mean, my mind was running the whole time, but I absolutely love this conversation. And I'm so glad you're out here helping couples, especially married couples, because we hear that the sex life may not be great. And I'm so glad you're out here, girl. You're doing God's work. You're keeping couples together. And so thank you so much for joining. Let's be mindful. And to everyone out here listening, thank you very much for listening to another episode of Let's Be Mindful. And just a reminder, y'all, be kind to somebody out there, please, because you never know what people are going through. Thank you and have a wonderful, wonderful day.